Hey guys, how's it going? This is Dan with GrapevineRecording and welcome to this video where I'm going to be doing what I said I was going to do in the previous video, which is basically going through the same motions on how to create like a random footstep sampler type thing, but this time I'm going to use battery. I mentioned that there are a couple of things a little bit different from using contact to using battery for this type of thing, and as I prefaced in the previous video, you can do this, I am sure, with every sampler. Every DAW comes with its own sampler, and I am pretty certain that you're going to be able to achieve some similar results with this than using battery or than using contact. But to me, this is just a little bit of an easier way to do it. So let's jump right in, shall we? So this is battery 4. This is like the screen that you are greeted with as soon as it opens up. So, as you can see, there are multiple cells which you can input samples into, and each cell corresponds to a key on a MIDI keyboard, like so. But what we're going to do is use our import our gravel samples once again, our trusty gravel samples, and we are going to create we're going to set up battery so it can play back these samples as if we were watching the clip live and just playing it in. So this is what we're going to do. If you go to files, and then basically if you keep pushing back, you'll get all the way to your top level stuff for your file management. You just get to where your samples are. Footsteps, gravel, walk, and here's my footstep samples. They're the same samples as yesterday, all live in the same place. From here, what you want to do is click one, hold shift, click the bottom one, click and drag them in. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do here. As you can see, there's a lot of empty cells. So what you could do, if you wanted, would be able to go to cell matrix and put it to 4x4. Just say yes. And when it does that, obviously now that's cut off the last two, but that's fine. So what we can do is just grab 5 and 6 and just insert them there. So following the problem... Well, not necessarily a problem. The difference with this is you don't get a little keyboard at the bottom of your screen like you do on Contact. So there's a bit of playing involved to figure out whereabout it is. But as you can also see at the bottom here where it says key range, you can click on each one and it'll tell you what the key number is. So as you can see, it goes from C, C sharp, D1, D sharp 1, and then goes to C2, which isn't great. But don't worry about that, because we're gonna change that. So if we follow the same kind of workflow system as yesterday, so what we want to do is try and get all of these cells to be triggered by one key, and then from there we're going to then create a kind of logic system which then cycles through what sample to play when that key is pressed. As I say, that might not make a whole load of sense, but if we just do it step by step, I'm sure you can follow along. So basically, what you want to do is click on your first sample, shift, click on the last sample, and then again, where I mentioned about this key range thing, this is basically says which key press triggers that sample. So now we've got them all selected. You can click on the little MIDI icon to the left, and then double tap the key that you want it to be. Remember to double tap. So if we say we want it to be C1, we just double tap C1. Now that we've double tapped the key that we want it to be, as you can see that each of these samples, now the key range is C1. If that makes sense. And of course, if we push C1 on our keyboard, we are again at that point where it'll trigger every single sample. Now, the thing that I would like to do at this point is to remove the velocity setting. If you've got a keyboard that's velocity sensitive, of course, the lighter you push it, the quieter the sample will play back, and the louder you push it, the louder the sample is. For footsteps, I don't think that's really that overly necessary. You can do this if you want, but what I like to do is, again, select all the samples, and here on velocity, where it says velocity to volume, just drag that down to 0. So now, regardless of how strong we push the key, it'll play back at 100. I think it's 127 velocity. Cool. So now what we want to do is create that bit of logic which decides which sample is going to be played every time we push the key. Because, of course, we don't want it to trigger every sample at one time, because that'd be silly. So you do that by going down to the setup button at the bottom. Again, just to make this a little bit easier, it's worth selecting every sample, just so now whatever changes we make, it'll change to every cell, so you don't have to go through each cell at a time and, make the same change. And at the bottom, where it says cell activation, you want the trigger to be note on and the condition to be, well, these are the two places again. If you keep it to cycle random, this will now randomly cycle through them keys, through them samples in the similar way that it did in Contact. So you just keep pushing the cell. So as you can see, it does trigger all of these cells, but if you look a little bit closer, you can see that the cell will light up. And this is a completely random process. If you didn't want it to be completely random, you could, once again, select all of them, go from cycle random and put it to cycle round robin. The difference with this is you would have to do it like so. So if you went on gravel walk 1, would be position 1. Whatever, you could change this to whatever one, in whatever order that you wish. So you could put this up to 3. It's a little bit of a pain because the arrows aren't very easy to click. So that'll be 4. That'll be 5. 5. And that'll be 6. So now it'll just continue to cycle through each of them samples based on the position number of each one. So it'll obviously now go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then return back to 1. I mentioned that a little bit in the Contact video as well, which I guess can be good. But for this type of stuff, once again, I honestly believe that a random cycle, one that is completely random, is better. Because again, it makes it a little bit different every single time. And as soon as things start getting repetitive, human ears can pick up on that very, very quickly. So the next step is, if you remember in the other video, when we're talking about Contact, we can add certain amounts of modulation to these samples, which will further increase the variety of each sample. And you do that by going to the modulation window. And these modulation slots on the side are very similar to the modulation panel in Contact. So again, you can, on the left, you've got different types of modulation. And then on the right, the things that you may wish to modulate. So these are your modulation destination. The modulation destinations on the right, modulation sources on the left. And again, there's some familiar ones here, like the random unipolar, random bipolars, and things like that. So to match what we did yesterday, again, we can click on modulation source, random bipolar, and then as a destination, we are going to choose tune. So it's a little bit different because it's pitch in the last one in Contact, but tune, it's the same thing. Again, this slider determines how much modulation takes place. Again, the only difference is it doesn't give you the value in semitones. So it can be a little bit difficult to gauge the actual amount, like maximum amount of modulation in this one. But again, the same thing applies, every time you now play it, it'll detune it by whatever this slider amount is. And as I say, personally, I would like to have a value for this slider. I'd like to, when I click on it, for it to come up and tell me what it is that it's doing. But that's fine. Again, you get 8 modulation slots, so there's a lot you can do here. Another thing that I thought that we could do, and this is something that I think battery is a lot better for than Contact, is again, it's a different type of modulation, but I'm going to use a random unipolar. I'm going to set that to the sample start parameter. And what this will do is basically every time we now play a cell, the start value, which is here, will start from a random place. So sometimes it might cut off a little bit more of that attack. So now when we play, sometimes, it'll cut off more of that beginning, which, again, further variety is a good thing. Of course, with this being just a sample start time, it can just be unipolar. We don't have to be bipolar because we don't want it. Obviously, once you get to the sample start of 0, it can't go anywhere before that, so that's not a problem. So if we're looking at things in battery, there are a lot of similar things that it does with Contact because it is in itself a sampler in the same way that Contact is. So you get a lot of the same things. You get volume envelopes, pitch envelopes, velocities, and filter. You get all that basic stuff. You get a lot of master stuff as well, which if you want to add an overall filter or EQ. But again, for footsteps, this isn't something that we're necessarily bothered by. It's great to have the option to do it, of course, but I want to use these samplers as a purely playback system, and I wanted it just to create an easier workflow for me to play in footsteps so I don't have to click and drag audio. And I think both of these options are very, very valid. I think Contact's got I like Contact just because I think the layout is a little bit more straightforward for me to understand. I understand why people would like to use battery, with a cell activation type thing. Of course, again, you can do the same thing as we did in Contact, where you could now add grass in the one after that. Set that up to, D1, and then basically the same thing, will happen as we said in the last video. You could just play C1 when you walk on gravel. And when they switch to grass, you can then push D1, and then the surface sound will change. But I guess that's it. I think so. I think that is everything that I wish to show. There's ways and means to do everything. Every sampler will work differently. I'm pretty sure that all you guys will have your own way of doing this. Some people might err on the side of, well, I like battery's cell system, which might be a little bit easier to actually import samples into the sampler. I think it's also a little bit easier to set up the logic system by just clicking on the MIDI note and double tapping the key. I think that makes a little bit more sense, and then all you've got to do is set it to random. You don't have to worry about groups or creating group zones or things like that, which you've got to do in Contact. But some people might like that. It's each to their own, and I've stressed this from the first video I think we ever did, is don't let anyone tell you that there's a way to do it, because there's multiple ways and there's no set way, and it's all about what you find most comfortable, in my opinion. And these are 2 ways to do it. They're not the only ways. They might not be the best ways, but it's just a way for you to go, actually, yes, I can now do that with my footsteps, or perhaps I can do this and then add another step in, which will, you might be able to say to me, have you ever tried it this way? Or have you ever tried to evolve that way of thinking to create something a little bit better? Because as I say, I want to learn as much as I want to teach. So I think if you have had any ideas through watching this, please let me know. If you've got any questions or any issues that, things might not be working quite the same way for you, please, again, let me know and I'll help out in any way I can. But, yeah, thank you for watching this. These have been the first 2 videos that I'm going to be doing since coming back properly. So hopefully you have enjoyed this. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and share the videos about it. If you've got any other audio friends who wish to learn this type of stuff, because I will be here making videos for the foreseeable future. But this has been Dan with GrapevineRecording. I will see you all very soon in the next video. Take care.